People were conned by the former president. They were conned into believing that the election had been stolen and that they should go to the Capitol as the president asked them to. They were conned out. I think the average donation from those false email requests was something like $17. These were people who weren't rich people. They were conned by the president. It was a big lie, and it was also a big ripoff.
And you say you were just asked, I think by Manu Raju, if the committee has found evidence that Trump and his family, quote, personally benefited from donations. And you said, yes. That's a serious allegation. Do you have more details? Is that a crime?
I don't know. We're a legislative committee, so that's for somebody else to decide. But for example, we know that Guilfoyle was paid for the introduction she gave at the speech. I mean, on January 6th, she received compensation for that.
But is that a crime?
I'm not saying it's a crime, but I think it's a grift.
It's a grift because you're telling Trump people, Trump supporters out there in the hinterlands, give us money to go
to court to defend this election when in fact.
And then instead, Kim Guilfoyle, who's Don Trump Jr.'s fiance, gets paid money for
$60,000
oh my
for
God.
2.5 minutes. You had money going to Mark Meadows Foundation and to another foundation that hired the Trump supporters who'd lost their jobs. So it wasn't what he said to his donors. This is to defend the election. It was an entirely different purpose. I think that was deceptive and not right.
Yeah. I mean, it was deceptive and not right. It was a grift and it was fraud. It was fraud. And if any of the donors who gave money to the Trump Save America PAC based on the emails that you received saying that you were contributing to an election fraud, to some sort of a fund to help pay for the court costs to go challenge the results of elections, and you gave money to, you can now sue. You understand that? You can sue because it was a grift. It was fraud. It was absolute fraud. Now, I don't know if they'll prosecute this grift. I don't know if they will or not, but obviously we have consumer laws that, apply to even Donald Trump. Remember, Donald Trump had a university called Trump University, and it was a complete and utter fraud, right? The Trump Foundation was a charity, and it was a complete and utter fraud. And the Justice Department had to close down the Trump Foundation while Trump was president. So this should not surprise as much as it should irritate and upset people who gave money to this campaign, these emails. Sometimes they sent 25 emails a day asking people to make donations. And he blasted out literally millions of emails. And as it turns out, the grift, the big lie, generated $250 million for Donald Trump. Just let that sit there for just a brief moment. It generated $250 million for the official Trump Election Defense Fund, except there was no such fund. So you know what some of your money paid for? You remember the former senator from South Carolina? By the way, you're having primaries today, South Carolina. Go vote. Go vote. It's, I have no horse in this race. It's a completely Republican thing. It's South Carolina, for God's sake. But remember your former senator, Jim DeMint? Okay, so Jim DeMint left the Senate and he moved over to this charitable foundation called the Conservative Partnership Institute, which sounds very official. Yeah, the chairman of the Conservative Partnership Institute is Jim DeMint, the former senator from South Carolina. And when you were donating to the Election Fraud Fund, when you were donating cash to help Donald Trump defray the costs of going to court for Rudy Giuliani and Jenna Ellis and the rest, Sidney Powell and all that. Really what you were doing was you were paying Jim DeMint's $500,000 a year salary. That's where $500,000 of this $250 million went to. That's just a piece of it. This is so disgusting. Yeah, Jim DeMint, his annual salary, $500,000, according to the most recent 990, which is the IRS form. Another $1 million went to a conservative organization that employs several Trump washouts, several people who, left the Trump administration. They moved into something called the America First Policy Institute. And these fundraising emails that were supposed to be paying for the court challenges was actually going to them to pay their salaries. $204,857 went to the Trump Hotel collection. And $5 million went to the company that put on the January 6th event called Event Strategies, Inc. $5 million. Drain the swamp, everybody. Drain the swamp. Here's Chuck Rosenberg explaining it a little bit better.
If investors or donors were told one thing, for instance, Stephanie, if I told you that you should donate to my fund because I'm going to invest it for you, or I'm going to use it for a certain purpose, and that induces you to give me money, and I don't do what I promised you I would do with it, that's a fraud. And it looks like that happened to the tune of $250 million with tens of thousands of donors. You recall that Steve Bannon, another grifter, was indicted, ultimately pardoned by Trump, but indicted for a very similar scheme, the Build the Wall scheme, in which he induced people to part with their money to build a wall on the southern border. And the money that they raised went to Bannon and his co-conspirators' personal use. That seems to be what's going on here. So you follow the money. And here, if you follow the money, it goes from donors who were induced to part with it based on a series of lies to PACs and foundations and ultimately to members of the Trump family and their friends. And that's a crime. And now, I don't know who concocted the scheme. I don't know who wrote the pitch. I don't know who authorized the emails. But I could tell you, if I was still in the Justice Department, those are precisely the questions I would be asking, because this has all the makings of a financial fraud.
Shocking. Shocking, I tell you. Yes, it's so Stephanie, what's her name? Kimberly Guilfoyle, who is Junior's fiance. She got $60,000. She was paid from, I'm guessing, Event Strategies, Inc., who took $5 million from this fund that you thought you were giving to help Donald Trump go to court for a fraudulent lie that the election was stolen in the first place. In the second place, you were doubly lied to because they said, oh, now we need money to go file in court and we have to pay Rudy and we have to pay Sidney Powell. But really, you were paying Kimberly Guilfoyle $60,000 to give a 2-minute speech on January 6th at the January 6th Save America rally. You paid her. You paid Senator Jim DeMint $500,000. You paid for the Trump Hotel collection. I don't even know what you paid for there. Did you pay for hotel rooms for what? I don't know what you even paid for there. And then you paid Trump administration officials who left the Trump administration, who then went over to something called the First Policy Institute for a job, and you paid their salaries there instead of your dollars that you thought you were. I mean, this is such a scam. It's such a fraud. It's so Trump. But this is something for you to know that you can sue over. Don't have time to listen to the live show? Want to hear more on your schedule? Go to RandiRhodes.com and buy a stinking podcast.